The course is comprised of 4 modules, with the introduction being around the history of the strengths approach and focusing in a little bit on what strengths actually are. So the history would take us back to the development of person-centred approaches, probably focusing more on the latter part of the 20th century rather than going into the history further back. So we think about the development of strength-based practice as part of a collection of client-centred practices that were being developed at roughly the same time from the mid-80s onwards. So alongside strength-based practice there was narrative therapy, there was solution-focused work and strength-based practice itself. And then we think about what strengths are. So we'll think about the broad range of strengths being not just the characteristics of strengths of people, for example, being creative or resilient, for example. While they're very important, it's really important to have a much broader idea of what strength can be. So that might include thinking about strengths as cultures, strengths as communities, strengths as resources, tangible strengths or intangible strengths, or internal strengths or external strengths. So a strength could be what you believe in about yourself or about others, but it could also be external strengths, like strengths that might sit outside of ourselves, perhaps in the community. It could be resources like services, for example, or infrastructure could be strengths. The second module focuses in on power over and power with. It's very important concepts. We can't have a look at strength-based practice without concentrating on the 2 principles of power over and power with. Because essentially what we're talking about with strength-based practice is how the people that we work with can become empowered to be their own agents of change. So we'll focus in on those 2 concepts and think about the effects of power over, when someone, for example, might be powerless and what might happen next, as well as what could take place if they had that power themselves. So the third module is thinking about strength-based conversations. What are the components of a strength-based conversation? And we'll think a lot about question asking, for example. We'll think about tools that can be used to elaborate on some of those questions and how a column approach can be used, for example, to frame the questions that we use and direct them in a particular way that focuses not so much on problems, perhaps more on a solution-focused kind of perspective on where to for somebody and how they might get there. It might think about what gets in the way, but we'll still think about the difference between a goal that someone might have versus solving someone's problem. Entirely different concept. The fourth module is focusing in on strength-based tools and skills. So some of the skills that we commonly associate with strength-based practice that aren't necessarily the province of strength-based practice alone, because they're out there and everybody uses them, are things like reframing, which is looking at an issue or a goal or a person from different perspectives. We'll think about normalising, where we can think about the commonalities of people's experiences. We'll think about measuring change and perhaps particular ways of doing that through the skill of scaling, for example. So that's where we sit. That's basically the 4 modules encapsulated into a few sentences. You'll see some videos of people in the field, people who actually do the work and who are applying strength-based practice. We'll hear some advice from people who are accessing services themselves, so how they experience strength-based practice. And as well as that, there'll be some reflective exercises where you'll have plenty of time to stop and think about how it can be applied in practice, but also the meaning that it has for you as a practitioner. I think people should do the course if they're looking for practical, applicable, useful ways of implementing strength-based practice. It might be because they're looking for ways of working that suit who they are as people. That's important.